One day, Uncle Hafiz starred in a beheading video. They shot it inside the mosque because it was the most sinister spot in town. All the insurgents wanted to take part, so Lieutenant Alvarado held a casting call and whittled them down to the 6 he thought looked most terroristical. The video was for Al-Mojave, a fake TV channel broadcast to the troops in their mess hall, which provided their main feedback on the progress of the simulation. The Al-Mojave reporters would sometimes show up and interview the villagers about how pro-American they were feeling. They particularly liked Noor, who had a good line in wailing and angry denunciations. Uncle Hafiz had been collaborating with the occupier, so he'd been kidnapped from his office in a dramatic dawn raid. He'd spent the day watching Vietnam movies with the insurgents, while the flat-top major directed fruitless house-to-house searches. Uncle Hafiz's death, reported Al-Mojave, would be a major setback for Blufor, since it called into question their ability to provide security in their sector. As far as Layla was concerned, they couldn't provide snacks and dips for their sector, let alone security, but she supposed this was the sort of thing they needed to find out before they went to Iraq and did it for real. She and Noor watched the beheaders get ready. They were even more ridiculously dressed than usual. One of them had lost his dishdasher and was wearing a little mermaid beach towel wrapped around his waist. I should say, actually, that the insurgents are all played by US troops, which is why they're not very good at maintaining their ethnically traditional clothing. Uncle Hafiz was willing to help them sort out their kefirs, but was hampered by the fact that his hands were cuffed behind his back. "Girls, please come help." So they tugged and tugged. Much against her will, Layla found herself assisting the tall black insurgent wrap a length of cloth around his head. He looked imposing and even more scary than usual, like a Berber dressed across the desert. To her surprise, he smiled and said thank you. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to her. "You're Layla, aren't you?" he said. His voice was surprisingly high-pitched, almost girlish. "Yes, like the song." She must have looked blank. He did an impression of someone playing a guitar and hummed a few notes of a riff. Not an Eric Clapton fan, then. Yeah, not so much. Me neither. I like that one, though. Everyone likes that one. He smiled again, waiting for her to say something. She stared awkwardly at the ground. "Come, Layla," said Uncle Hafiz sharply. "Come away, everything's ready now." The tall soldier ignored him and stuck out his hand for a dap shake. "I'm Thai." She took it, felt it twist and swivel in a quick series of moves, ending in a fist bump. "Yeah, that's right," he grinned. "That's the way." Lieutenant Alvarado clapped. "Okay, ladies, let's get this done." Uncle Hafiz knelt down on the floor. Thai put a hood over his head. "Allahu Akbar," said one of the insurgents. "Too soon," snapped Uncle Hafiz, his voice muffled by the hood. Since he was best at fiery rhetoric, they drafted in the imam to play the insurgent leader. He started off in formal Arabic, apostrophizing Allah the most gracious and most merciful, and addressing a call to the young men of the Islamic lands never to relent in their fight against the Crusaders and the Jews. He reminded them that there were only two choices in life, victory or martyrdom, and tried to lead his followers in a chant of death to the Crusader bush, temporarily forgetting that none of them understood a word he was saying. Lieutenant Alvarado, who was holding the camera, started to make wind-it-up gestures. The imam ignored him, launching into a new description of the hypocrisy of the invader, who dared use his serpent's tongue to talk of human rights and dignity when he was the greatest torturer in the history of the world. Alvarado lost patience. "Just cut his head off already." "Allahu Akbar," shouted the insurgents. Thai started to saw at Uncle Hafiz's neck, slicing into a blood bag, which spurted realistically down his shirt. Uncle Hafiz fell over onto the ground. "Cut," said Lieutenant Alvarado. "That's a wrap." Everyone got up. Thai uncuffed Uncle Hafiz, who insisted on looking at the finished product before he'd let Lieutenant Alvarado pass it for broadcast. He seemed pleased with the result. Very realistic," he said. "Very bloodthirsty." Contented, he turned the camera screen toward Layla. "See what they did to me? Animals." Thank you.